The scent of aged paper and forgotten stories was Eleanor Vance's solace. Rain lashed against the large, arched windows of the Book Nook, blurring the bustling London street into a watercolour smudge. Eleanor, or Ilara, as her closest friends called her, though those were few and far between, traced a finger along the spine of a first edition, the gentle hum of the old building, a constant companion. She was a creature of habit, of quiet observation, her sharp mind often lost in the labyrinth of narratives surrounding her. Beneath her seemingly reserved exterior lay a keen intellect and a compassion that, despite past hurts, refused to be extinguished. Today, however, a strange current ran beneath the familiar calm. It wasn't the usual chill of an autumnal afternoon. It was a premonition, a subtle tremor in the air, as she rearranged a stack of newly acquired antique clocks on a dusty display table near the back. Her fingers brushed against something cold, metallic, and decidedly out of place. It was a pocket watch, nestled among a collection of forgotten trinkets that usually went unnoticed. It was no ordinary watch. Its casing was a dull, tarnished silver, etched with intricate, swirling patterns that seemed to shift and dance in the dim light. A single, small emerald gleamed fiercely at its crown, like an ancient, watchful eye. No chain, no inscription, just the quiet weight of history in her palm. Ilara, with her inherent fascination for the forgotten, felt an inexplicable pull towards it. It felt hungry. She attempted to wind it, her thumb brushing against the worn crown. It was stiff, protesting, but with a gentle click it yielded. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the watch, then through her own hand, up her arm, and settled in her chest. The air around her seemed to ripple. The soft sounds of the rain outside momentarily muted, then subtly, profoundly changed. The world around her blurred for a split second, a sensation akin to static electricity crawling over her skin, then settled back into place. But it wasn't the same. A subtle shift in the light, perhaps, a deeper hush in the bookstore. Ilara shook her head, attributing it to her imagination. Yet the watch felt alive now, a faint, rhythmic tick-tock emerging from its heart. Just then, the bell above the main door chimed, a sound that usually announced the arrival of a new customer. But this chime was different, more urgent, almost frantic. A gust of wind, laden with rain, swept through the entrance as the door swung open, not by hand, but violently, as if pushed by an unseen force. Standing in the doorway, framed by the grey, unforgiving sky, was a man. He was tall, his dark coat clinging to a lean frame, soaked through. Rain plastered strands of dark hair to a pale forehead. His eyes, though shadowed by exhaustion and what looked like profound pain, held a piercing intensity, a depth that seemed to see right through the layers of the world. He was clearly injured. One hand clutched his side, staining the dark fabric a deeper crimson. He swayed, his gaze sweeping the warm, inviting chaos of the bookstore before landing on Ilara, who stood frozen, the old watch still clutched in her hand. His presence was like a sudden storm, an anomaly in her carefully curated quiet. He looked utterly lost, utterly broken. Yet there was an undeniable, almost dangerous elegance to him, even in his current state of disarray. He seemed to possess the weary grace of an old king, dethroned and cast out. "Excuse me." His voice was a low rasp, barely a whisper against the drumming rain. I seem to be lost." Ilara, who usually kept a polite but firm distance from strangers, felt an immediate, unbidden jolt of empathy. His words were simple, yet carried the weight of a lifetime of unspoken burdens. The sight of his injured hand, the desperate weariness in his eyes, stirred something deep within her. It was a reflex, a primal instinct to help, despite the logical voice in her head screaming caution. "You're hurt," she stated, her voice surprisingly steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She took a step towards him, the watch still warm in her hand. "Come in. You can't stay out in this." He hesitated, his gaze lingering on the watch, then meeting hers. For a moment, a flicker of something unreadable, recognition, surprise, crossed his features before it was masked by his stoic facade. He seemed to search her face, as if looking for an answer to a question he couldn't vocalize. Then, with a slow, deliberate nod, he stepped fully into the warmth of the bookstore, bringing with him the chill of the storm and the subtle scent of rain, damp earth, and something else. Something ancient and indefinable. As he moved, he stumbled slightly, a grunt of pain escaping him. Elara quickly rushed to his side, her arm instinctively going out to steady him. His skin was cold, clammy, and a sharp intake of breath told her his injury was severe. The small emerald in the watch seemed to pulse faintly in her hand, a silent, knowing heartbeat in the suddenly charged atmosphere of the bookshop. "Let me help you," she insisted, guiding him towards a worn leather armchair by the large fireplace, its embers a dying glow suddenly seeming to ignite with a new, urgent warmth. She felt an overwhelming, undeniable urge to protect this broken stranger, a stranger whose arrival felt inextricably linked to the antique watch now ticking steadily in her pocket. She had no idea who he was or why he was here, but she knew with an uncanny certainty that her quiet life in the Book Nook had just been irrevocably changed, and perhaps so had time itself. The man, who introduced himself simply as Julian, collapsed into the armchair, his breath ragged. Elara's trained eyes quickly assessed the situation. He was losing blood. Without a word, she disappeared into the small back room that served as her living quarters, returning moments later with a first aid kit, a clean towel, and a mug of steaming herbal tea. Her movements were efficient, her face a mask of calm, masking the whirlwind of questions churning inside. She knelt before him, the scent of antiseptic cutting through the musty aroma of old books. As she gently peeled back the soaked fabric of his coat and shirt, revealing a deep, ragged wound on his side, Julian flinched, a low groan escaping him. His skin was unusually pale, almost translucent, and surprisingly cold to the touch. Yet there was a strength in his lean musculature, a dormant power that even injury couldn't entirely conceal. "This is deep," she murmured, her brows furrowed in concern. "You need a doctor." He shook his head, a slight tremor running through his body. No doctors, please." His voice was stronger now, a deep baritone that resonated with a quiet authority, despite his weakened state. "Just help me clean it. I'll be fine." His eyes, a startling shade of storm grey, met hers, a silent plea mirroring the desperate need she had first seen. Elara hesitated, but something in his gaze, an echo of profound fear and desperation, made her comply. She carefully cleaned the wound, her touch surprisingly gentle, almost tender. She bandaged him with practiced ease, her focus entirely on his immediate well-being. Throughout the process, Julian remained stoic, only a slight clenching of his jaw betraying his pain. The only sound was the incessant rain against the windows and the soft rustle of bandages. Once finished, she handed him the tea. He took it with a hand that still trembled slightly, his long fingers brushing hers, sending a strange current through her. "Thank you," he said, his voice raw with a gratitude that felt profoundly ancient. I don't remember much. My name is Julian. That much I know." Amnesia. That explained the lost look, the vague answers. Elara looked at him, truly looked at him and saw past the cold exterior to a man stripped bare by circumstance. "You can stay here," she offered, surprising herself with the words. "Just for tonight, until you feel better. I have a spare room." Julian's gaze softened almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something akin to relief washing over his stark features. I wouldn't want to impose." But he made no move to leave. Later, as the bookstore settled into the quiet hush of night, Ilara sat by her small fireplace, the pocket watch still in her hand. Its ticking was a constant, almost hypnotic rhythm. She thought of Julian, asleep in the small, rarely used guest room, his quiet desperation, his refusal to see a doctor, his lack of memory. It all felt intensely mysterious. She wound the watch again, hesitantly, recalling the strange ripple from earlier. This time, she focused. As the crown clicked into place, the room didn't just ripple, it shifted. The scent of old paper intensified, the shadows deepened, and then, for a fleeting, terrifying moment, Ilara wasn't in her living room. She was standing on a bustling, opulent street. Carriages clattered past, gas lamps cast a warm glow, and people dressed in elegant, old-fashioned attire hurried along. The air was crisp, scented with hoarse and expensive perfume, and there, across the street, stood Julian. But he was different. He wore a finely tailored suit, his dark hair immaculately styled, his posture exuding an aristocratic confidence. He was laughing, a rare, genuine sound, with a beautiful woman on his arm, a woman with hair like spun gold and eyes that sparkled with adoration. They were vibrant, alive, undeniably in love. Julian looked utterly happy, utterly vibrant, utterly alive. A sudden sharp pang of loss, not her own, but an echo of someone else's, resonated within her. Then, just as quickly, the vision flickered, dissolved like smoke, and she was back in her quiet living room, the scent of old paper replaced by the lingering smell of antiseptic. Her heart pounded, a frantic drum against her ribs. It wasn't a hallucination. It was too vivid, too real. The watch. It wasn't just turning back time. It was showing her his past. The man in the other room, broken and amnesiac, was somehow connected to this vibrant, powerful figure. Was the watch showing her the moments before his current state? Was this how he had once been, before whatever catastrophic event had brought him to her door? A cold dread mingled with a profound curiosity. Julian was more than a lost stranger. He was a fragment of a much grander, more complicated life. A life that the watch, with its silent emerald eye, was slowly beginning to reveal. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. The rain had finally stopped, replaced by a profound silence that settled over the book nook, heavy with unspoken secrets, and the quiet tick of a watch that held the echoes of a lost life. Days bled into weeks, and Julian remained. Ilara, true to her word, had given him the small guest room upstairs. He was a quiet, almost spectral presence in the bookstore, moving with a silent grace that belied his previous injury. The wound healed with surprising speed, leaving only a faint, angry scar. He spoke little, often lost in thought, his gaze distant, as if searching for fragments of a past that stubbornly eluded him. Yet he was never idle. He began to help Ilara, first with simple tasks like dusting shelves, then with organising, and eventually with the nuanced art of cataloguing ancient texts. His intelligence was undeniable, his movements precise, almost instinctively elegant. Their shared existence developed an unspoken rhythm. Mornings would begin with the quiet clinking of teacups, the aroma of brewing coffee mingling with the scent of old books. Afternoons found them silently tending to the literary treasures, the soft rustle of pages, the only sound. Evenings were often spent by the fireplace, Ilara reading, Julian staring into the flames, his profile etched in shadow, a picture of profound solitude. Ilara found herself drawn to him, despite her usual guarded nature. His quietude wasn't a barrier, but an invitation to look deeper. She noticed the way his fingers, long and elegant, would trace the intricate designs on a leather-bound book, a fleeting look of familiarity crossing his face. She saw the flash of something akin to pain in his eyes when a melody from the radio would play, a fragment of memory seemingly sparked only to be extinguished. One rainy afternoon, as they were categorizing a box of old photographs, Julian picked up a faded image of a grand estate, its gardens sprawling, a fountain at its heart. His breath hitched. This feels familiar, he whispered, his voice laced with a nascent tremor of recognition. He stared at it, his brow furrowed in concentration, as if trying to grasp a slippery dream. Ilara, sitting across from him, felt a pang in her chest. She had been secretly winding the watch, almost every night, piecing together fragments of his past. The visions were becoming clearer, more frequent. She had seen him in the same grand estate, a young man then, commanding respect, surrounded by people who revered him. She had seen him on horseback, riding through vast, manicured grounds. She had even seen the woman with golden hair smiling at him, a vision of pure joy. It was a life of privilege, power, and deep, complicated connections. She understood now that Julian was not just lost, he was missing. Someone was looking for him, someone powerful. The thought sent a shiver down her spine, a prickle of fear for both of them. One evening, as the last customer left and the streetlights began to cast long, lonely shadows, Ilara was locking up. Julian unexpectedly stepped out from the shadows of a towering bookshelf. "Eleanor," he said, and the way her name rolled off his tongue, formal yet tender, sent a jolt through her. "Thank you for everything." She turned, her hand still on the lock. The air between them was thick with unspoken emotions. His eyes, usually guarded, were open, vulnerable. "You don't have to thank me, Julian," she replied, her voice softer than she intended. "You needed help, and you've been good company." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, a rare sight that transformed his stern features. "Good company?" he echoed, a hint of amusement in his tone. "I barely speak. I am a ghost of a man, a ghost with a very sharp mind and excellent taste in tea," she countered, a small smile playing on her own lips. "And your silence is comfortable. It's not empty." He looked at her then, truly looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. The silence that fell between them was profound, brimming with unspoken questions and burgeoning feelings. It was in that moment, in the soft glow of the streetlights filtering through the window, that Ilara knew their connection had deepened beyond mere charity. She felt a fierce protectiveness towards him, a desire to heal not just his body, but the vast, aching emptiness in his memory. She thought of the watch in her pocket, its quiet ticking a constant reminder of the secrets it held. She knew his past was grand, potentially dangerous, and she knew that the more she learned, the more she risked, not just her quiet life, but perhaps her heart. The delicate balance of their existence in the book nook was beginning to tilt, swayed by unspoken affection and the looming shadow of Julian's forgotten world. The air was charged, not with rain now, but with the subtle current of two souls irrevocably drawn to each other, standing on the precipice of a truth that could either bind them forever or tear them apart. The fragile peace of the book nook shattered one crisp November morning. Ilara was arranging a display of vintage maps, Julian silently polishing the brass fixtures near the front, a task he had taken upon himself with meticulous dedication. The usual gentle chime of the doorbell announcing a customer was replaced by a sharper, more aggressive jingle. A woman swept into the store, her presence a jarring contrast to the old-world charm of the bookstore. She was impeccably dressed in a sleek, tailored suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. Her eyes, a striking cerulean, scanned the room with an almost predatory intensity, landing with pinpoint accuracy on Julian. "Julian," she stated, her voice cool and crisp, like breaking ice. There was no warmth, no surprise, only a demanding certainty. Finally, Julian froze. The polishing cloth slipped from his fingers, clattering to the polished wooden floor. His back stiffened, his shoulders squaring, an almost imperceptible tension radiating from him. His eyes, meeting hers across the expanse of books, were no longer clouded by amnesia, but flashed with a flicker of recognition, and something else, something akin to wariness, perhaps even fear. Elara felt an immediate surge of protectiveness. She stepped forward, positioning herself slightly in front of Julian, her gaze meeting the woman's. "May I help you?" she asked, her voice calm, though her heart had begun to race. The woman's gaze swept over Elara, dismissing her with a faint, derisive curl of her lip. "I believe I am speaking to Julian, and frankly, you are in no position to intervene, Miss Vance, Eleanor Vance, and this is my bookstore," Elara replied, her voice gaining a steely edge. "Julian has been staying with me. He's been unwell." The woman let out a short, humourless laugh. "Unwell? Or conveniently amnesiac, perhaps? Julian, the game is over. Your family, your company, they've been searching for you for months. And now, I've found you." Her gaze was hard, uncompromising. "I am Lady Vivian Carlyle, and you, Julian Thorne, are my fiancé." The words hung in the air, a physical blow. Elara gasped, her breath catching in her throat. Fiancé? The woman from the watch, the golden-haired beauty. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, sharp and painful. Julian Thorne. The last name matched the intricate T she'd seen on some of the artifacts in her visions. Julian, however, remained silent, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. His jaw was clenched, his eyes narrowed, his hands balled into fists at his sides. He looked like a cornered beast, dangerous and unpredictable. "I don't remember you," he stated, his voice a low growl, devoid of any warmth. Vivian's expression softened, a theatrical performance of concern. "Darling, I know you've been through a terrible ordeal, but it's over now. The doctors will help you. Everything is waiting for you, our wedding, the company, your life." She took a step towards him, her hand outstretched. As she moved, Julian recoiled, a primal instinct kicking in. He seemed to shrink, then suddenly expand, an almost invisible surge of energy emanating from him. His eyes, for a split second, glowed with an eerie, unearthly light, a flicker of something profoundly ancient and powerful. Elara, standing close, felt a cold tingle, a sense of immense, barely contained force. Vivian paused, her hand dropping, a flicker of surprise and something akin to fear crossing her polished features. She had seen it too. "Julian," she said, her voice now edged with a strange mix of apprehension and command. "You cannot deny who you are. The Thorne Corporation is in disarray without you. Your position, your legacy, everything hangs in the balance." Julian finally looked at Elara, his gaze a whirlpool of confusion, fear, and a raw, unspoken apology. He had not lied about his amnesia, but the weight of his forgotten identity was now crushing. I need a moment," he said, his voice strained. "I need to think." Vivian sighed, a practiced display of impatience. "Very well, but my driver is waiting. You will return with me tonight. We have a great deal to discuss." She cast a final contemptuous look at Elara. "And you, Miss Vance, I suggest you forget you ever saw Julian. He belongs to a world far beyond your comprehension." With that, she turned and swept out of the bookstore, leaving behind a lingering scent of expensive perfume and an undeniable chill. The bell chimed, a final, sharp pronouncement. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Elara's ragged breathing and the distant roar of London traffic. Julian stood motionless, his back to Elara, his shoulders slumped. The image of him with Vivienne, laughing in love, flashed through Elara's mind, a cruel twist of the watch's revelations. "Julian," Elara began, her voice a fragile whisper. He turned, slowly, his face etched with a pain that went beyond his recent injury. "Eleanor," he said, his voice barely audible, "I truly don't remember her, or any of it. But she is telling the truth, isn't she?" He gestured vaguely to the opulent world she had glimpsed through the watch. "That's my life." Elara could only nod, a knot forming in her throat. The dream of their quiet existence, of healing him in the sanctuary of the bookstore, evaporated. A powerful, influential world was reclaiming him, a world where she clearly had no place. The watch in her pocket felt heavy, no longer a mysterious source of comfort, but a painful harbinger of a future that would tear them apart. The storm had passed, but its aftermath had just begun to rage within the Book Nook. The revelation of Lady Vivienne Carlyle and Julian Thorne's engagement hung heavy in the air of the Book Nook, like an uninvited ghost. Elara moved through the day in a haze, her usual meticulousness replaced by a distracted worry. Julian, for his part, retreated further into himself, his silence now a fortress rather than a quiet sanctuary. He spent hours by the window, staring out at the rain-streaked street, a profound melancholy clinging to him like the damp autumn air. Elara tried to engage him, to pierce through the wall he had erected. "Do you truly not remember anything, Julian?" she asked one evening, as they sat by the fireplace, the watch ticking rhythmically in her pocket, a constant, painful reminder of the life he was being pulled back to. He sighed, a deep, weary sound, fragments, shadows. Vivienne's face, it sparked something, a vague familiarity, like a half-forgotten dream. But the feelings associated with it, they're gone. And the corporation, the wealth, the power, it feels alien, like a story I've read, not a life I've lived. He ran a hand through his dark hair, frustration etched on his features. "It's as if a part of me has been carved out, leaving only an echo." Elara's heart ached for him. She knew the truth, glimpsed through the watch, the joyful laughter, the shared intimacy with Vivienne. It pained her to think of him returning to a life he couldn't recall, to a love he no longer felt, all while the man she had come to care for was lost in a fog of amnesia. That night, unable to sleep, Elara took out the watch. She wound it, her fingers trembling slightly. The ripple in time was more pronounced now, almost forceful. This time, the vision was longer, more intricate. She found herself in a lavish ballroom, chandeliers sparkling like 1,000 captured stars. Julian, in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, was dancing with Vivienne, their movements fluid and elegant. They were the epitome of power and grace, a magnetic force at the centre of the room. But as the scene continued, a subtle discord emerged. Vivienne's smiles became a little too fixed, her possessiveness a little too pronounced. Julian, though outwardly charming, had a subtle flicker of unease in his eyes, a shadow of something he couldn't quite name. Then the scene shifted dramatically. Julian was alone in a cavernous, high-tech office, his back to the viewer. He was staring out at a futuristic cityscape, a city of gleaming towers and flying vehicles. He held a glowing, ethereal orb in his hand, its light pulsing with an almost cosmic energy. His face, when he turned, was etched with a profound burden, a terrible weight of responsibility. He wasn't just a CEO, he was a guardian of something immense, something otherworldly. He looked weary, burdened by a power Elara couldn't comprehend. A voice, low and resonant, echoed in the vision, not Julian's, but another, older man's. The Kronos heart must be protected, Julian. It is the key to our world, and to time itself. If it falls into the wrong hands... The vision blurred, then focused again, this time on a frantic chase. Julian, in different clothes, was running through an ancient forest, pursued by shadowy figures with glowing eyes. He was protecting the orb, clutching it to his chest. He moved with impossible speed and agility, deflecting blasts of energy with a force field that shimmered around him. He was a warrior, a protector, not just a businessman. The chase led to a precipice, and as one of the shadowy figures closed in, Julian, with a look of grim determination, plunged into the chasm below, clutching the glowing orb. The fall was endless, a flash of light, and then... nothing. Elara gasped, jolting back to her own living room, the watch cold in her hand. The glow of the embers in the fireplace seemed dim by comparison. The chasm, the fall. That was it. That was the catastrophic event. He hadn't just suffered an accident. He had fallen protecting something called the Kronos heart, the glowing orb, and the shadowy figures. They weren't just a threat from his world. They were a threat to all worlds, perhaps even to time itself. Julian wasn't just a CEO. He was a guardian, a being from another, more advanced world, or perhaps even a different dimension, cursed to fall or to be hunted for protecting an artifact of immense power. The amnesia wasn't just a consequence of the fall, it was a protective mechanism, or perhaps a temporary effect of the Kronos heart's power, or even a deliberate act to hide him. The beautiful woman, Vivian, was a part of his earthly life. But his true purpose, his true identity, was far more complex and dangerous. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Elara quickly tucked the watch away, her heart still hammering. Julian was awake. He came down the stairs, his movements quiet as always, and settled into his armchair by the fireplace. "I had a dream," he said, his voice raspy, "of falling, and a light, a powerful light." He looked at Elara, his eyes searching. "Do you believe in other worlds, Eleanor?" Elara met his gaze, a newfound understanding in her eyes. The truth, glimpsed through the Kronos heart, was both terrifying and exhilarating. He wasn't just a man, he was a legend, a warrior, fallen from the stars. "I believe," she said, her voice steady, "that some stories are bigger than we can imagine, and that some people carry entire worlds within them." The wind howled outside, a primal sound that seemed to echo the vast, untold secrets now unfolding around them. The morning Julian was due to leave with Vivian felt like a death knell in the book nook. The usual sunlight struggled to penetrate the heavy clouds, casting the shelves in a mournful grey. Elara moved with a leaden heart, arranging books without truly seeing them. Julian, dressed in a fresh, though still borrowed shirt, looked outwardly composed, but his hands, as they clasped behind his back, betrayed a restless tension. Vivian arrived precisely at 10, her entrance as sharp and commanding as before. This time she wasn't alone. A tall, impeccably dressed man with a stern face and an air of quiet authority accompanied her. He moved with a bodyguard's efficiency, his eyes sweeping the bookstore with a calculating precision that made Elara uncomfortable. "Julian," Vivian said, her voice a silk-lined steel, "it's time. The doctors are expecting you, and the board is anxious to see you restored to your rightful place." She offered him a small, insincere smile. "Don't worry, darling. Your memory will return, and then everything will be as it should be." Julian looked at Ilara, a profound sadness in his eyes. He had spent the last night in a quiet vigil by the fireplace, the fragments of his dream about falling and a powerful light weighing heavily on him. He felt an undeniable pull to this woman, Vivienne, a sense of duty he couldn't explain, but an even stronger, more visceral pull bound him to Eleanor, to the quiet comfort she offered, to the inexplicable sense of peace he found in her presence. I don't know if I can go back to that life," Julian stated, his voice low but firm, surprising both Vivienne and Ilara. "Not when I don't remember it. I feel like a stranger in my own skin." Vivienne's composure cracked, a flash of irritation in her cerulean eyes. "Don't be ridiculous, Julian. You are Julian Thorne, CEO of Thorne Corporation. You have responsibilities, power, a legacy. This little detour is over." She gestured dismissively at the bookstore and then pointedly at Ilara. "And this simple life, this woman, they have nothing to offer you compared to what awaits you." Ilara bristled, her chin rising. "Perhaps what awaits him isn't what he truly needs, Lady Carlisle." Vivienne turned her full, icy glare on Ilara. "And what would you know of what Julian Thorne needs, a humble shopkeeper?" "I know he needs truth," Ilara retorted, her voice clear and strong. She reached into her pocket, her hand closing around the cool metal of the watch. "Not a fabricated life or a stolen memory." She took a deep breath, knowing this was a dangerous gamble, but one she had to take. Julian isn't just a CEO, he's a guardian. He fell protecting something immense, something called the Kronos Heart, and it seems, Lady Carlisle, that you and your associates are more interested in his power and that heart than in his well-being or his true identity. Vivienne's face went white, her composure completely shattered. The bodyguard stiffened, his hand moving subtly towards a hidden weapon. Julian's eyes widened, a wave of shock and dawning comprehension washing over his features. "What nonsense are you speaking?" Vivienne hissed, her voice barely controlled, a desperate edge to it. "What Kronos Heart? What Guardians? You're clearly delusional, trying to weave some fantastical story to keep him here." "Am I?" Ilara challenged, her gaze unwavering. She pulled out the watch. "Then tell me, Lady Carlisle, why does this watch hold echoes of Julian's true past? Why does it show a world beyond this one? A world where he is a warrior, protecting a cosmic artifact from shadowy figures. Why does it show his fall, not just an accident, but a desperate act of preservation?" Vivienne's eyes darted to the watch, a flicker of profound recognition, then fear. She knew of it. She knew of the Kronos Heart. "That's a trinket!" She spat, but her voice lacked conviction. "A cursed object! It's the very thing that brought him back, in some form," Ilara countered, "and perhaps the key to truly restoring his memory, or perhaps the key to understanding your involvement in his accident." Her words were a calculated risk, a desperate attempt to expose the truth. Julian, who had been listening intently, a silent witness to the unfolding drama, suddenly felt a jolt, a flash of light, a cold metallic touch, a desperate struggle, a glowing orb. The images were fragmented, but they were his. They resonated with the faint, persistent echoes in his amnesia. He remembered fighting. He looked at Vivienne, a chilling realization dawning in his eyes. "You know about it, don't you, Vivienne? You know about the Kronos Heart. You were searching for it." His voice was no longer that of a lost man, but of a formidable force, beginning to awaken. "And you didn't just want me back. You wanted It. Vivian's carefully constructed facade crumbled completely. Julian, darling, you misunderstand. It's for your own good, for the stability of our world. That power, it's too great for one man, too dangerous. Her words were laced with a desperate urgency, betraying her true intentions. Julian took a step towards her, his gaze intense, piercing. You never cared about me, did you? Only what I represented, what I held. Before Vivian could respond, the bodyguard lunged, aiming for Elara, clearly intending to snatch the watch. But Julian moved with an impossible speed, a blur of motion. He intercepted the man, his movements fluid and powerful, effortlessly disarming him with a swift, calculated strike that sent the bodyguard sprawling. His eyes, for a split second, glowed with that same unearthly light Elara had witnessed before, a silent testament to the ancient power stirring within him. The raw display of strength, the flash of otherworldly energy, silenced the room. Elara stared at Julian, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and profound awe. He was not just a man. He was indeed a guardian, a force of nature, and he had just protected her. Vivian, pale and trembling, knew she had lost. You're making a mistake, Julian, she whispered, her voice stripped of all pretense. A terrible mistake. You don't know what you're up against. They will come for you. And for her. She turned, a defeated but still venomous look in her eyes, and fled the bookstore, leaving the stunned bodyguard groaning on the floor. The heavy silence returned, broken only by the man's whimpers. Julian stood, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling, his eyes slowly losing their otherworldly glow. He looked at Elara, his gaze filled with a mixture of confusion, gratitude, and a fierce, nascent love. The Kronos heart, he murmured. It's real, and I think you just saved me, Eleanor, from a fate worse than amnesia. The truth, once a whispered secret, had finally burst forth, irrevocably changing their world. The revelation of Julian's true identity and the existence of the Kronos heart cast a long, ominous shadow over the Book Nook. The bodyguard, quickly dealt with and sent away with a stern warning, was a stark reminder of the danger lurking outside. Julian, now with fragmented but potent memories, understood the gravity of his situation. He was not just Julian Thorne, CEO, he was a guardian, a protector of a cosmic artifact, pursued by shadowy entities who sought its power. The fragments of his memory were painful, overwhelming. He remembered flashes of his world, a world of advanced technology and ancient cosmic responsibility. He remembered the burden, the constant vigilance, the loneliness of his task, and he remembered the moment of his fall, a desperate leap to protect the Kronos heart from forces that would misuse its power, scattering his consciousness across time and space, leaving him an amnesiac echo in a London bookstore. They will come for me, he told Elara one evening, his voice heavy with resignation as they sat by the fire, the Kronos watch ticking loudly in the stillness. Vivian was right about one thing. They won't stop. Elara clutched the watch, its cool metal a comfort against her trembling hand. Then we'll face them together, she declared, her voice resolute, despite the fear that gnawed at her. She had fallen deeply in love with this man, this warrior from another world, and she wouldn't abandon him now. Julian looked at her, his eyes filled with a profound tenderness that melted her resolve. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. No, Eleanor, this fight is mine, and I cannot risk you. His gaze was unyielding. They will target those closest to me. They will use you to get to the Kronos heart. A cold dread seeped into Elara's bones. She understood the logic, the terrible, heartbreaking logic of his words. Her presence made him vulnerable, and her quiet, human life was no match for the cosmic forces that hunted him. But I can help you, she pleaded, her voice cracking. The watch. It can show us things. It can help you remember. He shook his head slowly. The watch holds echoes of my past, yes. But the Kronos heart itself holds the true power. And I need to find it, to reclaim it fully, before they do. My amnesia was a blessing, a temporary shield. But now it's a liability. He closed his eyes, a flicker of profound pain crossing his face. I have to leave, Eleanor. I have to face them alone. The words hung in the air. A cruel, inevitable sentence. Ilara felt a searing pain in her chest, as if her heart was being torn from her. She had nursed him back to health, fallen in love with his quiet strength, and now he was leaving. For her protection, yes, but leaving nonetheless. Where will you go? She whispered, tears blurring her vision. He opened his eyes, his gaze piercing through her. I don't know yet, but I have to follow the fragments, find the heart, protect it. He paused, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. And I cannot allow them to find you. The next morning was even more desolate than the one before. Julian stood in the doorway, his few belongings packed into a small, sturdy bag. He wore a dark, utilitarian jacket now, his features set in a grim determination. The refined elegance was still there, but now tempered with a battle-hardened resolve. Ilara stood before him, the Kronos watch clutched so tightly in her hand that its emerald crown dug into her skin. She looked up at him, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Julian," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He leaned down, and for a fleeting moment, his lips brushed hers. It was a kiss of profound tenderness, of aching loss, a silent promise of a future that felt impossibly distant. "Keep the watch, Eleanor," he murmured against her lips. "It connects us. It will always connect us. And when the time is right, it will show you the way back to me." Then he was gone. He walked out of the book nook, melting into the grey London morning, leaving behind a profound emptiness that echoed through the quiet shelves. The bell above the door chimed, a final, mournful sound, a parting lament. Ilara stood frozen, watching his retreating figure until it disappeared from sight. The bookstore, once her sanctuary, now felt cold and vast, filled with the ghost of his presence. She brought her hand to her lips, still tingling from his kiss, and then looked at the watch. Its ticking, once a comforting rhythm, now felt like a countdown, a constant reminder of their separation and the dangerous, unknown path he had embarked upon. She was left alone, with a broken heart and a magical watch that held the power to revisit a love that had now become a painful memory, a secret longing in the heart of London. The weight of his sacrifice, the weight of their impossible love, settled upon her, an unbearable burden. Julian's departure left an unfillable void in Ilara's life. The book nook, once a haven, now felt like a mausoleum of memories. She found solace only in the quiet rituals of daily life, in the familiar scent of old paper and the rhythmic ticking of the Kronos watch, her last tangible link to Julian. She continued her work, her movements precise, but her heart was heavy, her mind constantly replaying his words, his touch, his impossible choice. Every night, in the solitary quiet of her living room, Ilara would wind the watch. The visions were no longer just glimpses of his past. They were becoming a chronicle of his present, a painful, real-time broadcast of his struggle. She saw him in desolate, forgotten places, in ancient ruins, in bustling, anonymous cities. He was lean, hardened, his features etched with weariness, but his resolve unwavering. He was searching, always searching for clues to the Kronos heart, for ways to reclaim his full power. The watch showed her fleeting skirmishes with the shadowy figures, entities that seemed to drain light and life, his innate strength barely holding them at bay. She saw the moments of intense focus as he pieced together ancient symbols, deciphered forgotten languages, and navigated a world far more complex and dangerous than she could have ever imagined. She saw him alone, constantly. The weight of his responsibilities, the immense power he was destined to wield, came at a terrible price. Profound isolation. He carried the burden of his world, of protecting the Kronos heart, entirely on his shoulders. There were no smiles, no laughter in these visions, only grim determination, and an aching solitude that mirrored her own. One particularly vivid vision showed him standing on a precipice, overlooking a glittering, futuristic city, his hand raised towards the sky, attempting to commune with something unseen. His face was strained, his brow furrowed in intense concentration. The Kronos heart, though not physically present, seemed to hum within him, a nascent power struggling to fully emerge. He was a king without a crown, a guardian without a sanctuary, a man haunted by a memory he was yet to fully reclaim. Elara felt the pang of helplessness, the bitter taste of their separation. She longed to reach out, to offer comfort, to share his burden. But she could only watch, a silent, heartbroken observer through the magic of the watch. Meanwhile, in Julian's world, the struggle was just as profound. He had re-engaged with his old life, not as its master, but as a reluctant pawn. He had found Vivienne, confronting her with the truth of her manipulation. She, cornered and desperate, had revealed more about the organisation that sought the Kronos heart. A shadowy consortium of power-hungry individuals who knew of its existence and believed Julian to be its key. They had orchestrated his accident, hoping to seize the heart in his moment of vulnerability. He had to play their game, to infiltrate their ranks, to understand their motives. He moved through lavish galas and clandestine meetings, his outward composure masking an inner turmoil. He was the cold, calculating CEO once more, but this time with a profound difference. His every action was driven by a single purpose: to find the Kronos heart and protect it, not for personal gain, but for the sake of balance, for the sake of the worlds it connected. And through it all, his thoughts would drift to Eleanor, to the quiet sanctuary of her bookstore, to the warmth of her kindness, to the unwavering strength in her eyes. He remembered the feeling of her hand in his, the scent of old paper and tea that clung to her. He remembered the solace she offered, the silent understanding that had blossomed between them. It was a stark contrast to the glittering, empty world he now inhabited, a world of power and deception, where trust was a luxury he could not afford. One night, as Elara watched him through the watch, a single tear traced a path down his resolute face. He was alone, in a grand, empty room, the weight of his task crushing him. He looked up, as if sensing her presence, his eyes holding a profound, unspoken longing. A silent communication passed between them across the impossible distance and the shifting sands of time. In that moment, Elara knew. His sacrifice, his self-imposed isolation, was not just for her safety, but for the greater good. He was battling not just for himself, but for something far grander. And she, with the Kronos watch as her guide, was not just an observer. She was a witness, a keeper of his heart, and perhaps a silent beacon in his desolate fight. The price of power was loneliness, but the value of true connection, even across worlds, was immeasurable. The whispers of Julian's perilous journey through the Kronos watch grew increasingly urgent. Elara witnessed his encounters with the shadowy figures intensifying, their power growing, their desperation to seize the Kronos heart becoming becoming more palpable. He was closing in on its location, but so were they. The ultimate confrontation was drawing near, and Julian was weary, fighting on pure willpower and the echoes of his true self. One night, the Watch's vision was more direct, more alarming. Julian stood in a vast, subterranean chamber, ancient and glowing with an eerie, pulsating light. At its centre, suspended in a shimmering force field, was the Kronos heart itself, a magnificent crystalline orb, swirling with cosmic dust and ethereal energies. Its beauty was breathtaking, its power almost overwhelming. Julian reached for it, his hand trembling, his face a mask of awe and pain. He was reclaiming it, but the process was agonizing, as if his very essence was being rewoven with its immense power. Suddenly, the chamber was breached. The shadowy figures swarmed in, led by a cloaked figure whose power surpassed all the others, and with them stood Vivian, her face a cruel mask of triumph. "You fool, Julian!" Vivian sneered, her voice echoing in the chamber. "Did you truly think you could hide this from us forever? The Kronos heart is ours, and with it, control over all time, all worlds." Julian, weakened by the reintegration of the heart's power, struggled. "Vivian, you don't understand," he gasped. "This power cannot be controlled. It will destroy everything." "A risk I'm willing to take," she retorted, her eyes gleaming with a mad ambition. "It's time, Julian. Give it to us or die." As the cloaked leader raised an energy weapon, aiming at Julian, the Kronos watch in Ilara's hand flared, pulsing violently. A searing pain shot through her, but it was not physical. It was a sudden, profound understanding. The watch wasn't just showing her his past or present. It was a conduit, a piece of the Kronos heart itself, connecting their destinies. It wasn't just his story, it was theirs. She realized the truth. The Kronos watch, which had brought Julian back to her, held a residual fragment of the heart's power. It was resonating with the main artifact, drawing her into the unfolding drama. It was showing her not just what was happening, but what could happen. And she couldn't just stand by and watch him fall again. A fierce resolve surged through her, stronger than any fear. Julian had chosen to protect her by leaving, but she would choose to protect him by coming back. Her quiet life in the bookstore felt impossibly distant. She was Eleanor Vance, the bookshop clerk, yes, but she was also the woman who held a piece of cosmic history in her hand, the woman who loved a guardian from another world. She sprinted to the large map of London, pinned behind her counter, a map she used to chart lost literary gems. Her eyes scanned it, searching. The Kronos watch vibrated, almost humming, pulling her towards a specific, forgotten corner of the city, a place marked by an old, abandoned observatory she'd always found fascinating, a hidden chamber beneath. It had to be there. "I'm coming, Julian," she whispered, her voice filled with a determination that would brook no argument. She didn't know how or what she could do against such power, but she knew she couldn't let him face it alone. She grabbed her oldest, warmest coat, her trusty flashlight, and the watch. The world outside was cold and dark, but a burning light ignited within her. Meanwhile, Julian was struggling. The cloaked figure, a formidable foe, had him cornered. The Kronos heart pulsed wildly, attempting to fully merge with him, to unleash its power, but Vivian's forces were overwhelming. He could feel his strength waning, the pull of the heart a painful, demanding presence. He saw the energy weapon charging, aimed directly at him, and then a sound, faint but undeniable, the distant, urgent chiming of a bell, not a church bell, but something else. Something familiar, and a surge of raw, desperate hope. Ilara burst into the subterranean chamber, her breath ragged, her hair dishevelled. but her eyes blazing with an unyielding courage. She held the Kronos watch aloft, its emerald heart glowing fiercely, mirroring the main Kronos heart, creating a blinding flash of light that momentarily stunned the shadowy figures. And Vivian, "Leave him alone," Elara cried out, her voice echoing with a surprising authority, a voice that carried the weight of her pure, unwavering love. Julian looked at her, his eyes wide with shock, then a profound, almost heartbreaking relief. "Eleanor, no, you shouldn't be here." Vivian snarled, "The little shopkeeper returns, and with a trinket, kill them both. Take the heart." But Elara was not the timid clerk they thought. Empowered by love and a piece of cosmic power, she knew her role. She met Julian's gaze, a silent message passing between them, a message of absolute trust, of shared destiny. She had come to make the impossible choice with him. He would not be alone. The fate of worlds and the true meaning of love hung in the balance, illuminated by the twin glows of the Kronos heart and its smaller yet equally potent counterpart. The subterranean chamber erupted into chaos. The shadowy figures, recovering from the flash of light, moved to attack Elara. But Julian, spurred by her unexpected arrival and the raw power radiating from the Kronos watch, found a new surge of strength. He stood between Elara and the attackers, his body becoming a conduit for the Kronos heart's power, a shimmering shield of energy pulsating around him. "You will not touch her," Julian roared, his voice no longer human, but imbued with the ancient, resonant power of a guardian. His eyes blazed with a fierce, unearthly light, reflecting the cosmic swirl within the Kronos heart. As he fought, Elara understood. The Kronos watch wasn't just a conduit, it was a key, a fragment of the heart. It could amplify its power, or perhaps synchronize with it. Remembering the way time had rippled around her whenever she wound it, she knew what she had to do. With trembling hands, she took a deep breath and wound the Kronos watch, focusing all her will, all her love, on the moment Julian fell, the moment his memory had been fractured. As the crown clicked, a blinding flash of emerald light erupted from the watch, enveloping the entire chamber. Time didn't just ripple, it fractured. The shadows flickered, Vivian's triumphant sneer froze, and Julian's pained expression became a snapshot. The chamber, the attackers, everything became a canvas of swirling colours and dissolving forms. Elara wasn't just witnessing his past, she was reaching into it. A profound sense of understanding washed over her. The watch didn't literally bring him back from death. It had given her the chance to change the moment of his fall, to rewrite his personal destiny, to prevent the total amnesia, to bring him back to his full self, perhaps even stronger. She was not turning back the clock to a point before his death, but rather healing the break in his timeline, restoring his wholeness. In the heart of the temporal vortex, she saw him clearly, Julian, falling through the chasm, clutching the Kronos heart, his face etched with terror and determination. And then she saw herself, a faint, glowing outline, reaching out to him, infusing that moment with her presence, her love, her belief. The two Kronos artifacts, the grand heart and the small watch, resonated, synchronized. The fractured timeline began to mend. Julian, in the vision, looked up, saw her ethereal form, and a look of profound peace, of complete remembrance, washed over him. The fragments of his mind clicked into place, not just of his power and his world, but of their shared moments in the Book Nook. With a final, shattering burst of light, the vision dissolved. Elara found herself back in the chamber, breathless. But the scene had changed. Julian stood before her, whole and fully aware. The Kronos heart was not suspended. It pulsed gently in his hand, now fully integrated with him, its light mirroring the brilliant clarity in his eyes. The shadowy figures were gone, dissolved into ethereal dust, vanquished not by brute force, but by the mending of time, by the restoration of the Guardian. Vivienne stood frozen, her eyes wide with terror, then crumpled to the floor, her power stripped away, her ambition extinguished. Julian looked at Elara, a profound understanding, a deep, unwavering love shining in his gaze. "Eleanor," he whispered, his voice rich and full, imbued with the wisdom of ages and the warmth of genuine emotion. "You didn't just save me, you brought me back, all of me." He stepped forward, the Kronos heart pulsating gently in his palm, and reached for her. Elara, tears streaming down her face, met him halfway. His embrace was solid, real, imbued with the strength of a fully restored guardian and the tenderness of a man who had found his true anchor. "I remember everything," he murmured against her hair. "The fall, the burden, the loneliness, and the quiet strength in your eyes, the warmth of your kindness. You were the light in my darkness, the truth in my amnesia." He held her close, the Kronos heart glowing softly between them, its light illuminating their joined hands. The world outside, the cosmic threats, the demands of his powerful heritage, they were still there, but now he faced them not alone, but with Elara by his side. "What now, Julian?" she asked, her voice muffled against his chest. He pulled back slightly, his gaze unwavering. "Now," he said, a gentle smile gracing his lips, a smile she had longed to see. "We create our own time, a future, not just for me, not just for my world, but for us, together." He looked at the Kronos heart, then back at her, a profound promise in his eyes. "The true power is not in controlling time, Eleanor. It's in choosing what to do with the time we have, and I choose you." The Kronos watch, now quiet and still, no longer ticking, felt warm in her hand, its emerald eye reflecting the brilliance of the main Kronos heart. It had fulfilled its purpose, not to rewind time endlessly, but to forge a new beginning. In the silent, glowing chamber, two souls from different worlds found their synchronicity, their destiny